If you're the sentimental type, you know that your home is full of treasures. The people in your life might not always agree, but you'll prove them wrong one day, and that's where we come in. What's happening? Today we're talking about some of that stuff you have in your attic that could also be worth big bucks. Some people get nostalgic enough to shell out a small fortune for items that might otherwise seem worthless. These are a few of their stories. There's often a fine line between being a collector and a hoarder. But honestly, that's for you to decide. Whatever the situation, you'll definitely want to be on the lookout for these valuable items before your next purge or your next hunting garage sale. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button for us and subscribe to the channel so we can notify you about new content. Now it's time to climb into your attic, open a few boxes, and look inside to see
what happened?
To the kitchen. Tupperware. First sold to the public in 1946, it's one of those brands that's so popular that it struggles to maintain its copyright.
Tupperware can't spill or leak. You can store it any which way in your freezer or refrigerator.
Kerosene, escalator, and trampoline are also examples of brands that lost their copyright over time because consumers used their brand names to refer to their competitors too. And now companies like Tupperware, Jacuzzi, and Xerox are also currently facing the same battle. People refer to virtually any plastic storage container as Tupperware, even if it's not intended for food. And while we're on the subject, those disposable containers are disposable, and it's okay to let them go after you've gotten your money's worth. Or maybe a few months at your house. Mom, I'm talking to you, get rid of those. I'll get you some new ones, I promise. But probably not these, because Tupperware collectors are always on the lookout for these genuine merchandise, including the Millionaire Collection salt and pepper shakers, Wonderlear bowls from the 40s and 50s, and the Servalier Astro bowls from 1972. They can fetch anywhere from 30 to 75 bucks on eBay. Not exactly life-changing money, but many of us still have a ton of those in the back of our cabinets. Vintage Pyrex is also worth a couple hundred. Just be sure to throw out that old frozen casserole first. To the shed. Furniture and electronics are more or less disposable these days, but a couple of generations ago was a different story. If you inherited your granddad's toolbox, it could be a treasure chest. Antique woodworking tools planes are always in demand, such as the Chaplin No. 1 plane that recently fetched over $7 grand at an auction.
The old Chaplin plane was surprisingly easy to set.
Tractor giant John Deere got out of the tool business early, but if you have one of their wrenches, you can probably make a down payment on a new tractor. They only produced 100, and one of them recently sold for almost $17,000 at an auction. Not quite enough to buy a tractor, but you can replace the wrench pretty easily, and then figure out what to do with the remaining $16,980. Lunch boxes. Picking out a new school lunchbox was a big part of back-to-school shopping, and it happened like once a decade. But it was the best way to rep your favorite movie or TV show. And they certainly appeal to collectors because they usually have short production cycles. Fans of numerous films and cartoons will probably give you a good price on a gently used lunchbox. The price will go up if you still have that original thermos too. A 1963 Jetsons lunchbox goes for close to $2 grand these days.
What are you looking to get for it?
$700.
And the super rare 1954 Superman lunchbox. Well, that puppy is worth nearly $16,000. And since we're on the subject and we don't really have phone booths anywhere anymore, where does a modern Superman go to change? Chipotle. Old computers. When personal computers were first released to the public in the late 70s, they cost a small fortune and didn't do much. In fact, if Bill Gates and Paul Allen actually attended their classes at Harvard, they might have never seen the ads for the Altair 8800 in Popular Mechanics, deciding then to write a code for it.
I stayed up all night reading the book to see if we miscoded some of the instructions.
That's all changed now. and computers have gotten so cheap that most people replace them every few years. But some nostalgic techno-weenies with money to burn covet vintage computers, particularly early Apple computers. An Apple I computer originally sold for $666.66. Yikes, maybe that's why the world's gone to hell. But it was 1976 and Steve Wozniak liked repeating numbers. In 2014, an Apple I sold for almost $1 million. There are also plenty of people who will give you a good price for an original Macintosh. Neither one is useful today, but they once made several people overnight millionaires. If you find one of them in a sentimental mood, you might be able to fund a startup of your own with the proceeds. Cereal boxes. Some sports fans might hang on to an old Wheaties box featuring their favorite athlete, but most people consider cereal boxes trash. That's why they interest collectors. A holographic imprinted Batman cereal box can get you more than $8 grand. General Mills recently released a 50th anniversary limited edition cereal which includes all 5 of their favorite monster cereals in one big scary bowl. The cereal includes Count Chocula, Boo Berry, and Frankenberry cereals, which have been popular for decades. And it also includes the Fruit Brute and Yummy Mummy cereals, which were discontinued due to lackluster sales. Fans of filmmaker Quentin Tarantino might remember Lance the heroin dealer enjoying a bowl of Fruit Brute in Pulp Fiction right before Vincent and Mia showed up. If you have an original Fruit Brute box, it could be worth over $10,000 to the right collector. As far as getting a hold of Mr. Tarantino goes, well, you're on your own for that. Albums and tapes. Vinyl albums have always been popular with collectors and are currently enjoying a huge resurgence in popularity in the digital age. The first pressing of the Beatles' White Album is worth over $8,000, and there's a large market for secondhand vinyl too. DVDs rendered VHS obsolete, and most people don't own a VCR anymore. But Star Wars faithful are always willing to shell out a generous amount of Republic credits for VHS copies of the original trilogy. Disney fans are also willing to pay big bucks for out-of-print movies. The Black Diamond edition of 101 Dalmatians, a playable copy, is estimated to be worth $750. And a copy of The Fox and the Hound, well, that can be worth twice that. Cassette tapes have suffered the same fate as videotapes, but a copy of Prince's The Artist album, well, that recently sold for $4,000. I wonder what I can get for my old CCR tapes. Typewriters. As anyone who was forced to use a typewriter will tell you, the advent of modern word processing was a game changer, but some people might be prepared to pay dearly to hear the familiar racket of clicking keys once again. A vintage typewriter in working order can certainly score you a couple hundred, and even more for an antique. And if you can prove a famous writer once used it, well, the sky's the limit. Toys. Toys are made for kids who don't care nearly as much about them as the nostalgic collectors that some of them grow up to become. Each holiday season, parents are forced to brave throngs of bargain seekers in daring pre-dawn doorbuster sales to win their children's approval. Some of the sales are a shove away from a knife fight.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
But nothing's too good for our kids. Most of these toys are readily available on the shelves for months after the holiday rush. Many collectors now buy movie tie-in toys as an investment and leave them in the packaging. But most toys are eventually snuck into the donate bin after kids lose interest. True collectors love iconic toys, like those old maroon Viewmasters, true Care Bears, and G.I. Joe action figures. Parents snuck those creepy Furbies and Teddy Ruxpin dolls up to the attic pretty quickly. But seriously, they're worth hundreds now. And since every Cabbage Patch Kid was one of a kind, they are always a hot item for collectors. Sadly, there's still very little demand for those old Billy Bass toys. But I have an attic full of them and I am holding out for the right offer. They mean a lot to me and I can't just give them away. Video games. You can still find plenty of Nintendo, Sega, and PlayStation games floating around on the cheap, and most modern game systems are backward compatible. But some vintage games are becoming harder to find. An original Game Boy from 1992, that version that came bundled with Tetris, well, that can fetch over $1,500. And only 26 copies of the 1990 Nintendo World Championships cartridge were produced. and the gold version is worth more than $26,000. The Atari 2600 ET game was rushed to market in 1982, just in time for the holiday season. The game had virtually nothing to do with the movie. There wasn't any obvious way to even win the game, and it's generally regarded as the worst video game of all time. In fact, hundreds of copies were secretly burned in a New Mexico landfill before being covered with concrete.
We found an intact E.T. the video game.
But if you have an unopened copy at home, it could be worth over $1,500. That sounds like enough for a lifetime supply of Reese's Pieces. That's been our trip through the old storeroom. They say one man's trash is another man's treasure, and we're on board for that. Some of us are better than others at making an unemotional purge of their belongings, but discovering and flipping a few of those seemingly worthless items probably wouldn't suck. Just remember where you got that idea from, and don't forget to let your old pals at What Happened know your good fortune. But if that's too much to ask, please feel free to drop a comment. Do you have any of these rare items at home? Are there any that we left out? Please let us know. We read every comment and we want to hear from you. We'll see you next time so we can tell you